If you are experiencing foundation issues, get a free estimate from Ox Foundations.
71 degrees in downtown Sylacauga this morning, a partly cloudy sky today, and hot with highs in the low 90s. I've known Mark Ledbetter and his wife Rhonda Ledbetter and their children. I've known the children all of their lives, and Mark and Rhonda for many, many years. And Mark joins us this morning here on the show. And Mark, very, very trying time for the people in Afghanistan. Also, you and Rhonda are parents of 4 children. Daniel served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Your initial thoughts on all of this?
Well, I like to say that Daniel survived 2 tours Afghanistan. Well, initially my thought, I'm very somber about this because of the ramifications that are taking place because of the conversations I've had with veterans of the conflict. Concerned about ramifications for us as a nation, and also I look at it from a broader perspective, a global perspective as well, and some of the impacts it has upon not just Americans, but around the world, and how it's impacting the religious community. So somber is a word that I use when I reflect upon this.
Now, Daniel served 2 tours there, and he, along with a number of other veterans, are really kind of taken back by what has happened.
There's 3 basic reactions that I have heard from several different veterans of the conflict. One is disappointment. Disappointment for a couple of reasons, actually.
When you see the turmoil and the chaos, I don't know what these people are trying to do right here.
They're trying to get on the plane. Some actually fell off the plane. They attached themselves, and as they took off, they fell off the plane. This is part of the emphasis here. Is a disappointment because we're leaving people who support us high and dry. We had apparently no really evacuation plan for the locals who were supporting us, and it seemed like
and there were some that were supportive of America.
Very supportive. One report tells me that most of the population grew up under our presence there. I mean, we were there for 20 years in this operation, ironically, Enduring Freedom. Has a tragic conclusion to it. They're disappointed because we leave them high and dry, and the biggest disappointment is because it was their idea is this was inevitable. Mm-hmm. They knew this would take place. What you're seeing, they knew, and the reports that they're hearing that I have heard of what the media is not reporting is there's some atrocities taking place. And we knew that would happen, and so that's one of the largest disappointments they have is that we almost like we have betrayed the people who supported us. So they have this feeling. Well, I have comrades, I have buddies who lost their lives. We have veterans who came back maimed, not only physically but mentally with the PTSD. We've had some. I don't know the numbers, but a significant number of suicides of those coming home. So the human tragedy in all this is exceptionally large. In when you put it all together, not only our losses, but what's taking place even now in that land over there.
Let me ask you this before we go any further. You're very close to your kids. And you've talked with Daniel about this. What is his thoughts?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to divulge anything specific anyone has said other than general consensus of everyone I talk to. That I know that's maybe not what you want to hear, but I'm not going to pinpoint anyone on any particular thoughts. And I have personal reasons for that. And also I told each and every one I talked to that I would protect their identities because I don't want people to put a face on this at this point in time.
But he has friends and relationships that he built while he was in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. I have pictures of him at home with some of the locals. Pictures of some of their pets. You know, we don't put a human face on a lot of this because when we talk about war, we're almost distance ourselves that we're talking about human interaction, human relationships. But he did have first relationship, have pictures, relationships with some of the local themselves, some of the members of their military that they were there to train as well as protect. The idea is that one, we left enough military armament to arm a 300,000 standing army. That's how many tanks, planes.
We just left it.
Reports have been that some of the Air Force are actually transporting Taliban on helicopters that we used. This is just, it's just appalling to me that we knew this was going to happen, and this is the story a lot, though we knew it was going to happen. But more telling was this is the consensus of everyone that I talked to is they knew this was inevitable. That speaks volumes about why we went in there and what was our expectations, what were going to be the results. 20 years, and so we decide we're going to pull ourselves out, and we don't give them really enough notice to prepare for this. High and dry is the word I keep hearing. And so it makes me go back to day one. You know the history.
It's a long history.
Afghanistan, that time under the rule of Taliban, which incidentally means student. They're students of Islamic sect that evolved out of India that goes back to Wahhabism. And there's a story behind all that. But they were harboring Al-Qaeda, depending on what part of Alabama you're from. And it was, of course, they were the ones who recruited those who drove the planes, flew the planes into the Twin Towers, which, you know, that etches in our collective memories, at least for one generation. Maybe it's been forgotten already by many, like many have forgot Pearl Harbor. And so this whole thing is just hard to comprehend and put into context and express the full ramifications of what we're witnessing in Afghanistan today. There's things going on that, like I said, you don't hear on the national media. We know that pastors over there have received notice. We know where you are. We're coming for you.
And they're not going to have a party for them either.
No, and they're talking about tolerance. There will be no tolerance. There will not be anything. They will have to recant or, at best, go to prison. But if we follow the pattern that was set before, because they're the same mentality of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. No matter what they say, that is the root of Taliban.
So trust is not a word that you would use lightly for the Taliban.
I wouldn't believe anything they said. That's my opinion, not yours, not the station's opinion. It's my opinion. I wouldn't trust them because it's part of their strategy. It's documented. Part of their strategy is to lie if it will gain advantage over your enemies. And they regard us as an enemy. They regard us as an enemy. Make no mistakes about it. They regard us as an enemy. They regard Israel as an enemy. They regard any Western influence as an encroachment upon their cultural and religious values. Nothing has changed. Not one thing has changed in their mentality. They have a good political spin. They say what they want us to hear. They talk about, for instance, if you're going to permit me to go down this path, for instance, they say women are going to have equal rights over there. Under whose standards? What standard of equal rights? For instance, there was a woman reporter who was reporting one day, and she had a more modern look. She didn't have the covering. The next day, she's wearing full adornment according to their culture. So what rights does she have? She has whatever rights that is prescribed by their Sharia law. So, it puts on a nice face to say, yes, women's rights, and we're not going to harbor terrorists.
They are terrorists.
They are terrorists. They harbor Al-Qaeda. And if we think Al-Qaeda and ISIS is dead, one of the leaders said the reason the United States lost this war is because they have no patience. He said, we're very patient people. I may not see it in my lifetime, but it will come when Islam will rule the world. These are his words. They're not my words. These are his words. The American policy has never looked at this as a religious war. It has always been a political war. It's never been religious. But to ignore that is one of the reasons why we have a hard time. We have a hard time because we want to impose our American cultural and democratic political processes upon the people who have no desire for that. Their mentality goes way back to where it's clannish. They gravitate to the strong, those who can provide security and safety so they can waver depending on who has the biggest club.
Let's talk about, Mark, what could possibly happen with the women and the girls that have been left behind and the Taliban taking over.
You're talking about what is not going to happen, what is happening.
Okay.
Young girls, underage girls, as young as 12, are being given over to the Taliban. This is a cultural. Some people are going to react where you're castigating derogatory remarks against Islam. I'm not. I'm talking about this brand of what is taking place. Things that are documented and recorded. That's what I'm talking about. And there have already been young women who have been already given over to the Taliban for whatever pleasures they have, marriage arrangements, whatever. They have no right to say, so no, I don't want to marry. They're just going to have to go with it. When we had the Western culture in Afghanistan, they had murals. They had women with uncovered faces. Within a day, they're painted over because it goes against their position, their beliefs,
We don't really understand that in America, do we?
We do not understand it. We don't understand it. We probably don't want to understand. We just want to be mad at it. We just want to get angry about it. Well, that's not right. We don't understand it. I'm not exonerating. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm saying we don't understand it. If we understood the nature of it and the reason for it, then we'd still probably be angry, but let's be angry for the right reasons, not because we're just...
Billions and billions and billions of dollars that we have invested in Afghanistan in the last 20 years.
I think the figure's over $1 trillion. A lot of that, of course, has been military aid, provisions to their armies, whatever money we poured in to try to get the government democracy established, the propaganda war of winning hearts because we went in. Part of our two-pronged idea is to go there to establish a certain amount of peace, a perimeter of peace, and to win their hearts. But what we have learned is you cannot fight a war, and that's what we were in, with political correctness. It just doesn't work. You go in and you establish and you conquer, then you can try to implement ways that would endear their hearts.
Then why and how did we miss it so badly in Afghanistan? And it was just a debacle of how it ended and is ending, and we're trying to get people out. And the Taliban says, hey, we're going to provide safe way for the people to get out. And I read another story where they've got the city of the capital city encircled, nobody in, nobody out. So how did we miss all of this?
We kept changing policies. We kept changing leadership, which tells me that it was fluid. It didn't have definitive objectives to begin with. They just had an idea. We're going to go in. We're going to move the Taliban out. We're going to eliminate this safe harbor for terrorist activity and terrorist training, etc. But what I have read, I have studied this for many years now. We just goes back to one thing. We have not really considered the fact that we cannot impose our way of life on a people who do not think like we do. I'm not talking about they're wrong. They just don't think like we think. And we want to impose our will and our ways upon them when they really have no concept.
In their eyes, they're right.
Well, sure they are. I mean, they're clannish. They don't recognize when we went in. I say when we went in and colonized under the British and so forth, we created things that were foreign to them. They didn't understand nation states. They understood clans who ruled over certain areas and territories. There's always been a stronghold in the mountains between Pakistan and Afghanistan who ruled that area. And they couldn't root them out. We tried to. We couldn't root them out. But they were a clan, and people gravitated to them because they provided safety and security. And it didn't matter if their leader was an authoritarian. Whatever he said went, and they didn't mind. I've got food on the table. I've got shelter over my head. And, I was talking to someone about this. We're basically the same. As long as somebody can secure peace and security, we're going to gravitate.
There's a different country in it.
So, I mean, it's just
you've written several books. As a matter of fact, you got a book with you this morning. And Mark is a Bible scholar. He studied history, and he knows what he's talking about. This book, I don't think is in print now, but you wrote this book when?
I released it in 2017. It's Politics and Prophecy, Shaping the Future of the Middle East and the World. It did it's actually an expanded version of something I wrote in the 1980s, which was the Roadmap to Armageddon. And this adds more to it. And if I could find someone to pay me to stay home and read, I'd revise it and republish it. It needs to be updated.
Does this follow along with what's happening in our world today?
Oh, absolutely. This is the big picture. What we don't see as Americans, one, we're particularly individualistically looking at how this impacts our vets, which is legitimate. Then we look at how does this affect America. Well, right now a lot of blame here and there, but I'm not hearing anything from Pelosi, Schumer, and McConnell about this. Not really. There may be some things, but I've not seen it or read it. So it's not had an impact other than they want to, take pot shots at one another and blame one another. Former presidents, we've always had a policy. We'll blame Trump, and Trump blames Obama, and Obama blames Bush. I mean, that's just it, the way American politics is. So how does it affect us in America? We don't want to stop and pause and think about it. But if we stop and think about it on a global perspective, that's entirely different. Afghanistan is regarded as a gateway to the east. It is a landlocked, it is strategic place. One of the reasons if we had established, we had a foothold there, just like we have a foothold in South Korea, the Philippines, Japan. Afghanistan would have given us a foothold on the western border of China, South Korea, Philippines, Japan. So, from us as an American perspective, that would have been an ideal launching pad if we ever have troubles with our nemesis called China. Mm-hmm. And I can't go into that. But if you do any research, we've been in a long-term battle with them. But for perhaps the global perspective comes to mind a passage from Daniel, a passage from Ezekiel. Daniel he has a visitor named Gabriel. Gabriel was trying to get to him with an interpretation of a dream he had. He said, but he was held up because of the prince of Persia. We're talking about a spiritual realm, and a lot of people will, but the spiritual realm, the prince of Persia, his influence, that spiritual dominion, again, I understand, I'm going out on a limb here, people don't understand that. Nevertheless, in the book of Daniel, it talks about the prince of Persia and his influence and how he fights against Michael, who is the chief prince of Israel. Then I think about Ezekiel 38, 39, Gog and Magog. These nations that we're talking about comprise what Ezekiel describes as Gog and Magog, Tubal, in that part of the world. If you look at the map, you'll see that is the northern, it's the southern nations that used to be part of the USSR, no longer part of, they're independent. All these nations, they all comprise that. So in a larger picture, in a global picture, then we're talking about some very interesting developments regarding what we call end times. We don't think of it like that. We live for the immediate time. I want to interject one thought, if I can, as far as our nation. You know me, you've said you know me for several years, and you know that I'm not an extremist. Mm-hmm. I'm not a sensationalist. And I hesitate to say this because people may think I'm trying to be a spiritual elitist. But I have adopted a habit, a custom, to go down to City Hall before sunrise and pray. And in my prayer, I'm walking around that little circle 7 times. I don't do it every morning. It rained yesterday. But there's a big flood lamp that shines up on our flag in the front of City Hall. Mm-hmm. Today I felt impressed just to go stand in front of that lamp. And what I saw was a shadow fell across our flag and, of course, our city. A shadow, not of God's closeness, but a shadow, an ominous shadow, because there is a tremendous need for a spiritual awakening. This is my heart. This is my passion. These things are not happening haphazardly. These things are not just randomly taking place. There is an orchestrated attack upon the world at large to come under one global entity and the church.
Let me, we just got a couple more minutes to go. I do want to touch back on, and there are a lot of people in Alabama that have family members and that have connected with this and had service members in Afghanistan. but they're also supportive of churches there and supportive of missionaries.
Yes.
And they can't get out.
They cannot get out.
So they could face intimate death.
They will.
Right now.
They will. What can I say?
And Brother Mark, they know it.
They know it's coming, just like the persecuted in Pakistan, just like the persecuted in India, North Korea. They know it's coming. And so I can't visit them in prison like Jesus advocates in Matthew 25, but I ask God to visit them, to give them strength. If they're on the point of wavering, encourage them right now, not to give up, not to give in. It's easy for me to sit here and say that, but they need our prayers. They need our support because they know who they are and they know where they live. And if they don't recant, I know what's going to happen.
So do they.
They do. And going back to one other thing, the sad thing is we knew it when we took our troops out.
Wow.
That, to me, there's a moral and ethical responsibility there.
Mark, a minute to close in prayer.
Father, I thank you so much for the love and compassion that you have. There's a lot of questions that we do not have answers for, but you do. So we put our trust in you. We're going to look to you. We believe in you. God, help those who are in peril. Their lives are in peril. They're in chaos. God, just be a present calm. Let the Prince of Peace overshadow them. And Father, indeed, faithful and true are your ways. So we trust you to do that which is righteous, good, and true. And we love you and thank you for your abiding presence for them and upon us. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Mark, if there's people who'd like to know more about what you're talking about, can they contact you?
They can.
You do Facebook. Email or Facebook or what?
You can look up Mark Ledbetter Facebook. You can look at website, reclaimthemantle.com. I have information there.
Okay. Appreciate you being with us this morning, Mark Ledbetter.
I appreciate it. Thank you much. It's always an honor to be here.